I want to talk about the biggest news, the biggest Star Wars news of the past week, which was the announcement by Disney on StarWars.com that they have asked Jon Favreau, the director and actor who has played in many Marvel movies, has got a lot of experience in the movie and TV industry, to be at the helm of a new live-action television series that is going to be distributed on the on-demand platform that Disney is preparing to launch towards the end of this year, probably beginning of 2019. And currently, Disney, and so also Lucasfilm, owned by Disney, and Marvel, they're all kind of assembling the content that will make this a must-watch channel and of course, must-subscribe channel. One of the things that Disney has already said is that it's going to be probably a bit cheaper than Netflix. And that's a good thing because, of course, a lot of families already have a subscription to Netflix. And if they would price it at the same level, then, what are people going to choose? But the combination of a slightly lower price plus hard-to-miss content like Star Wars, I think they're going to make so much money. And hiring Jon Favreau is, I think, a very smart move. And in this episode, I will give you my comments on why I think Jon Favreau is the perfect guy to hire for a TV show based on the Star Wars universe. First of all, I have to address some of the criticism that emerged when Disney came with that announcement that they'd hired Jon Favreau. And a lot of that criticism came on International Women's Day. And it was aimed at not Jon Favreau as a person, but it was aimed at the fact that it was yet another white male that was hired to have such an important role in the Star Wars universe. Why not hire a female director or a female writer? Why not hire someone who is not from, let's say, European or American descent? Why not some more diversity on those higher echelons of your organization, Disney? And you know what? I agree with that assessment. I think it is important for an international organization that Disney is to have diversity that reflects the diversity of the people that they want to reach. It's just even, let's say, disconnected from the ideological reasons for that. It's just smart business. If you're the more diversity you have in your own organization, the more you can cater to the world out there. And so that's what they probably have noticed when they launched the latest Marvel super hit, Black Panther. I mean, that is a major shift in the movie industry, and I'm certain that will have a major impact also in who they are going to hire. However, in this particular situation, I think people are maybe overreacting a little bit, even though I think it is very important for Disney to find that balance, male-female balance, white, not white, etc. The position that they needed to fill requires just such an incredible combination of different talents. And also, the persons have to be available, that I think for them, this was the best move that they could make right now. It doesn't mean that in the future they won't hire other people. In this case, Jon Favreau is exactly the person that they needed to hire. And I tell you why. First of all, Jon Favreau, and this is very important for Disney, has a long-standing relationship with Disney, and it's a good relationship. We've seen some of the directors of the big movies, even Star Wars movies, being fired because they were hard to work with, or they were too opinionated. They didn't match the Disney approach. And so Disney has been quite forceful in their acting on if they feel that there is not a good working relationship, or these directors or writers go in a different direction from the overall mission of Disney, what they want to accomplish, they fire them and they hire someone else. Well, Jon Favreau is a sure bet because he's been with Disney for so long. He was, of course, the director of Iron Man. The first Iron Man movie was a massive hit. Iron Man 2, he did Jungle Book for Disney, another super hit. featuring a lot of CGI characters. Comes in very handy if you're working in the Star Wars universe, of course. He was also briefly attached to the movie John Carter, which of course was a terrible, terrible film. But he didn't even get to direct it. There was so much trouble. But the fact that they went to Jon Favreau to try to salvage this movie is a sign, I think, of the trust they had in him. And he is a very nice guy. I've seen him both act. I've heard a lot of his director's commentaries. I've seen behind-the-scenes stuff, interviews that he did. There was this other not-so-good movie, Cowboys and Aliens. And there, on the Blu-ray, there is an extras video or a series of videos in which Jon Favreau has a conversation with the main actors in the movie, and it's such a great talk, and you really get a sense of it. This guy is amazing to work with. He's super kind. He's got lots of humor. He's very creative. Well, and sometimes a movie fails. Well, that happens to every director. But I can totally see that just on the personal level of character experience, Jon Favreau is a really good choice for Disney. He's also involved in some upcoming movies that Disney is involved with, most notably the live-action version of The Lion King. So that's going to be kind of in the vein of Jungle Book. Entrusting such a crown jewel of the Disney stable or the Disney catalog to Jon Favreau, I mean, what a sign of confidence in what he can pull off. And he's shown with Jungle Book that he can make it work. The relationship on the level of Star Wars is also long-standing, and a lot of people missed that because, well, now it's in the news that he will be involved in Star Wars, but already in 2012, he was one of the last man standing when it came to the director duty for The Force Awakens. He was on the short list of Disney. They ultimately went with J.J. Abrams, but Jon Favreau was seriously being considered as the director of The Force Awakens. So he's been in their plans for quite a while. And then in 2015, 3 years later, Jon Favreau in an interview himself said that although he would not be working on the anthology film, so there was some rumor that he would be at the helm of one of those in-between movies, that was not going to happen. But he said, then he hinted, he could work on future Star Wars movies at some point. I think by then he probably already knew that something was happening, something was going to happen, and Disney was just waiting for these plans surrounding their on-demand platform, and those were probably in very early stages. But they just waited with the announcement until that was a little bit more solid. So that also means that if in 2015 Favreau already knew that he was going to be involved in the Star Wars world, he has had a lot of time to think about what he wanted to do in this Star Wars playground, and that's a good thing. The more time people have to think, the more ultimately I think the result will be good. So that's another aspect. There's another reason that I think Jon Favreau is such a good choice for the Star Wars universe, and that has to do with his upbringing. Jon Favreau had a Jewish mother. She was from Russian Jewish provenance, and a Catholic father. And he went to Hebrew school. He even did his bar mitzvah, which means that he has been brought up with biblical stories. And the biblical overtones of Star Wars are hard to miss. It's one of the reasons that I love Star Wars so much and that I do a show like this. It is because it was on purpose that George Lucas used a lot of biblical motifs and themes in his story, because he was convinced that Star Wars had a role to play beyond just providing entertainment. And perhaps later on in his life, George Lucas became a little bit more, I don't know, greedy perhaps, or too much focused on the toy revenues, etc. But his original intent was to create a new mythology that would be able to convey certain moral values and certain moral absolutes, but also certain religious themes and philosophical themes and choices, using a new language, because according to him, kids in his time didn't read the Bible anymore, or didn't read the Torah, or whatever. And so he felt that you can't have a future as mankind without stories that bring the values of the past to the future. That is why every Star Wars movie starts with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's connecting ancient stories and ancient values with the future and the futuristic aspects of the Star Wars story, talking to the here and now. That was his goal. And so Jon Favreau, being familiar with these biblical stories, with these grand mythologies, I think will make him very apt at helming this enterprise. And of course, Jon Favreau will not be the only writer. He will hire, like in any TV production, lots of other writers. And so that's probably what is going to compensate, perhaps, for him being a white male director. He can hire women writers, and just like what happened in the Star Trek universe and in other movie franchises. What you see in with Wonder Woman. See how much that has revolutionized the superhero storytelling. I think something like that is totally also going to happen in the Star Wars world. And if you look at The Last Jedi, how strong the female roles were and how important to the story, I mean, I think that Disney knows exactly how they want to balance things in the future. Also very much a Star Wars theme, of course, this balance of the Force. So I think that biblical background will help him tremendously to also protect kind of what makes Star Wars, which are these Bible-like stories and biblical motives and biblical structure also in the storytelling. What makes him also, I think, a very good choice for a Star Wars television series is his sense of humor. He's a very funny guy. He always makes me laugh. If you've seen the movie Chef, and by the way, I read that he's going to do a sequel to Chef. It's going to be based on Indian cuisine. He wrote and directed and played in that movie, and it's so funny. His bit in Spider-Man was hilarious. And Star Wars needs humor. Star Wars has always been a balance between action and character-based development of the story and humor. Without humor, you don't have Star Wars. Even in The Last Jedi, even though there were some pretty grim and depressing aspects of the story, but there was also a lot of humor. I mean, Porgs and Chewie, to name but one example. So, and I definitely think he brings that to the table. Plus, he's got experience on both sides of the business. He has ample experience as an actor, also experience as a writer and director. And so, of course, and he's very much an actor's director. Very different from George Lucas, by the way, who didn't really jive well with actors. But Jon Favreau really is a pleasure to work with. And you hear that from everyone in every interview. And it's not just because they have to say that, because they're contractually obliged to be kind to the director. He truly is a nice guy. And he has experience of producing productions, films and TV series with lots of special effects, which also is probably something that Disney was looking for. Another reason that I think he's a very good choice for to be at the helm of a Star Wars television series is that he is the father of 3 relatively young kids. When he was asked to play a voice role in the Clone Wars animated series, his oldest boy was, I think, around 10 or 12 years old. And so he knows how children today look at Star Wars and what they like. And he's got 2 younger daughters. And so he's close to this younger generation that, of course, is the prime target audience of Disney's new on-demand channel. And so Star Wars, for me, has always been a family story. And even though you have movies like Rogue One, definitely a little bit more geared towards a slightly older audience. When I look at my nephews and what they love about Star Wars, it is because it is very much geared towards family. You can watch this with your father, mother, and brother and sister. And I think that is definitely what Disney is aiming for. They want this to be family friendly, and Jon Favreau can totally do that. I'll talk about the consequences of this as well for the story that this TV series may tell, because I have some ideas about that as well. briefly about his TV experience, he directed the pilot for the NBC show Revolution. And I think he was even with J.J. Abrams, one of the executive directors. So he worked with J.J. Abrams as well, knows how television works and what is required to make a good, successful TV series. He's also currently the executive producer, not many people know this, of The Orville, kind of this Star Trek-like series with McFarlane that is perhaps even more classic Star Trek than Star Trek Discovery currently is. So he knows his job. He knows it. And the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'll get to the implications for the story of this TV show, which is much more interesting, of course, is he has already been in Star Wars multiple times. He did the voice acting for Pre Vizsla, which is kind of funny because, of course, it's a play on the word previs, which is pre-visualization. It's a technique that they use. It's a storyboarding, basically, for a movie. Pre Vizsla, who is the leader of the Mandalorian Death Watch. So he has already played a role in the Star Wars universe. And he also voices the four-armed alien you very briefly see in the Solo teaser trailer. And the name of that alien was recently revealed by a toy manufacturer to be Rio Durant. So he's Rio Durant. He also plays in the new Solo movie. All right, that's enough about why I think he is perfect for this particular role as the executive producer and probably also main writer of this new TV series. Now, what is this going to be about? That's what everybody wants to know, and that's what you don't find in the press release. However, I have some theories. First of all, this is not the first time that a television series about Star Wars has been in the making. Actually, George Lucas, before he sold Lucasfilm to Disney, was already in a very advanced stadium of creating a television show. It was, at the time, not well known where that would air. He probably wanted to sell it or just put it on ABC or something like that. But George Lucas ordered 50 scripts for individual television episodes of about, I think, 40 minutes apiece. And he hired a ton of great writers to write those episodes. And one of those writers, and I was like, what? When I read that, is Ronald D. Moore, my favorite television writer, who wrote the fantastic Battlestar Galactica reboot. I have so much respect for him as a writer. He is amazing. And he was also the one who made Deep Space Nine such amazing success when he got involved in the later seasons. So Ronald D. Moore, when I heard that he had been working on Star Wars, there was only one thing going through my mind. It's like, get him back. Hire him again. Now, back then, the idea was to write something very different from what perhaps now is going to be the scope of this television series. According to George Lucas, he wanted to create something that was more akin to a film noir type of series with much grittier, gloomier stories. And the series was called, back then, Star Wars Underworld. The premise was that it would take place on Coruscant, whatever, however you want to pronounce it. It was going to be the kind of the mafia layers of this massive planet-spanning city, and it would follow bounty hunters like Boba Fett and some other bad dudes, and it would be all about this, like, the messier side of the Star Wars universe. Now, the writing was already in a very advanced stage, I should say. Stadium is Dutch. They also did a lot of artwork. There was also a lot, and the artists worked closely together with the writers. And one of the things that Ronald D. Moore fondly remembers, and this goes back to 2008, that's when they were writing these scripts, was how much they were free to write whatever they could come up with. George Lucas told them, don't worry about the money. Rick McCallum, who back then was a producer in Star Wars at Lucasfilm, he was the producer of The Phantom Menace and kind of a peculiar guy. I thought he was too much, I don't know, I didn't like his influence on the Star Wars franchise back then. He's now no longer part of Lucasfilm. But he was constantly like, oh, don't, this is going to cost us millions and millions. The goal, what George Lucas wanted to do, is to create a television series that would be filmed with a television budget, but would look like a feature movie. He had crazy ideas back then. George Lucas was focused and sometimes fixated on using modern equipment, and so he wanted to shoot the television series with consumer cameras. The HD cameras were brand new back then, and of course, as you know, he filmed the prequels with digital cameras, which in hindsight was a stupid thing to do, because back then the digital cameras, not like nowadays, the digital cameras that I use personally are tons better than what he used for the Phantom Menace. So it makes that digital material so hard to upscale and I don't know. But filming a television series in the world of Star Wars using consumer grade cameras, what a bad idea. And then, of course, back then, 2008, think of the way special effects look in the prequels. It doesn't hold a candle to what an even low-budget series can do nowadays. However, that brings me to another interesting thing. What back then may have been way too ambitious to realize, and of course, ultimately, the whole project got shelved. It didn't go through, and when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they initially did not promise anything in terms of what they were going to do with those scripts. But I think that nowadays, with a limited budget, you could probably match the ambition of the scripts much better than when it would have been filmed in 2008. Add to that something that Kathleen Kennedy said. This was, I think, in 2015, towards the end of 2015, Kathleen Kennedy told Slash Film in an interview that Lucasfilm had been looking at the scripts and the material that was developed for Underworld, but also for a video game that got shelved. The video game is called Star Wars 1313, or 1313. And the main star of that video game would be Boba Fett. And some people are still frustrated that that game never saw the light of day. But they were looking at that and seeing, and she, at the time she hinted that some of the stuff, the material that had been developed, may still be used at a later stage. So, could this mean that this new TV series is going to be called Star Wars Underworld and will take place on Coruscant? Personally, I hope they don't. And I have some reasons to think that that won't be the case. First of all, the world has changed. And for a while, that gritty, grim film noir style was all the rage, even in video games, but also in movies. I mean, I've complained many times about how much directors love to drain away all color and all optimism from the movies. And I predicted back then, a couple of years ago, that there will be a return of happy films that give you a positive feeling and give you hope. And Star Wars is all about that positive, feel-good feeling. And, you know, that is why I knew that the Marvel movies are an example of that. The Marvel movies, especially if you contrasted it with DC Universe, the Marvel movies are always optimistic. They have humor, they're cheerful, they make you smile. The DC movies, it's so depressing. And now even Superman is on Prozac. What is the world coming to? So I definitely don't want a Prozac-inducing Star Wars TV series. So I think the times have changed. And this is now no longer something I think that Disney is going to pursue. However, there may be an element that they will use, but I'll get to that in a second. The second reason that I don't think they will go for a gritty underworld mafia type storyline is that they are aiming this new streaming channel to families. So you want to have family-friendly Star Wars content. You want the kids to beg their parents, please subscribe to the Disney Channel. So hiring Jon Favreau, to me, is a confirmation that they will go a more family-friendly route. But there is one thing that they may actually use. I think that the time frame of this new television series is going to be exactly the same time frame that was used for the development of Star Wars Underworld. And I have a couple of reasons for that. First of all, think of what we already know about future Star Wars productions. We know that they hired the writers and showrunners of Game of Thrones to write a new series of Star Wars movies. What time frame are these going to be about? Well, look at Game of Thrones. Ancient, mythological, almost storytelling, medieval times. I'm thinking Old Republic. And there's another reason that I think that these guys will probably go back in the past, go before the prequels in terms of the storytelling time frame, because Rian Johnson is penning a new trilogy that is going to be after the current movies, Star Wars movies. If I'm not mistaken, that's going to be about a different time and a different place in the Star Wars universe. But I'm thinking Rian Johnson is all about the future. Look at the final scene of The Last Jedi. It's about this boy who's looking at the stars and can use the Force. So Rian Johnson was already preparing where he was going to bring the story next. It's going to be about the unknown future. Now, with The Last Jedi behind us, you really don't know what the future is going to bring. All the tropes of Star Wars are gone. Well, not all of them, but a lot of the things that the fans thought they knew for sure. You know, of course, Rey is the sister of Kylo Ren and a daughter of Luke Skywalker or whatever. All that has been obliterated by the script of The Last Jedi. And Rian Johnson is trying to create a new future for this, not just that particular trilogy, but I think he was setting up his own trilogy. So Rian Johnson about the future, the Game of Thrones guys, I think about the past of the Star Wars universe. So it makes sense that this television series is going to use a time period that appeals immediately to an audience that doesn't know what they get. That's the thing of streaming services is you only know what you get when you're subscribed. So Disney wants to make the incentive to subscribe as big as possible. So instead of saying, well, we're going to do this television series and it's going to be about Star Wars in the prehistoric times when dinosaurs used the Force, who is going to care for that? We're not going to watch that. That's way too big of a risk. But if they tell you, hey, we're going to tell you stories that happen between Star Wars 3 and Star Wars 4, this will all be in the same time frame as Star Wars Rebels, an animated series that was really successful in bridging the gap between the prequels and the original trilogy. And it's going to feature Boba Fett. One of the reasons, from what I've heard, that the Boba Fett standalone movie never happened is that Disney was planning on saving that for a TV show. And I still think that Boba Fett would be a great character, but not just Boba Fett. Here's another thing, just something to ponder on. Jon Favreau has been directing a very important actor that we will see in the new Solo movie, the upcoming Solo movie. Donald Glover is playing Lando Calrissian. And there's another role that Glover is currently voicing, and it is Simba in The Lion King, which means Jon Favreau is directing The Lion King. Jon Favreau has been working in a very intensive way with Donald Glover, who is already the fan favorite of the new Solo movie. So I'm thinking, would I like to see a television series in which I can see Donald Glover playing Lando, a younger Lando, and we get to see that story, what happens after the Solo movie and before The Empire Strikes Back? Man, that would be such an instant hit. Who doesn't want to see more Lando? So it's just a hunch that I have, but I'm thinking Jon Favreau, he may have brought up that, I'd like to work a little bit more with Glover. Look how popular this guy is. The movie hasn't even been in theaters yet. Let's bring in Lando. And that would follow a strategy that many TV series have used before, very successfully, crossovers. You don't need to have every episode featuring Donald Glover. That would be very expensive because he's a popular actor. But you could bring him in for the season's finale. You could have some of these well-known characters like Darth Vader popping. Of course you want Darth Vader in the TV show. We've seen Darth Vader in how successful his appearance was in the brief minutes that we saw him in Rogue One. We've seen him in Rebels. But why not bring him back? I mean, you have Darth Vader, you have an instant audience that will love that. So if they would pick the same time frame between Star Wars 3 and Star Wars 4, they would have familiar territory, which would have a massive appeal to the existing Star Wars audience, both young and old. And it may also explain why the Game of Thrones people were hired. Because when they hired the Game of Thrones showrunners to write a new series of movies, they were hired not for a TV show like Game of Thrones, but for movies. My initial reaction was, Rian Johnson's already writing the next trilogy, so they need in-between movies. These are going to be written by the Game of Thrones writers. If those stories are going to be about the ancient past of the Star Wars universe, then all of a sudden you free up all those characters that you wanted to put in the standalone movies. Yoda, it's just even the minor characters, and you could put them in the TV series. And everyone wants to watch that because you want to fill in the gaps. There are so many plot holes that you could integrate in this television series, and you could give depth to both the prequels and the sequels. There are so many opportunities there, and I think it would totally fit. So what I'm thinking, here's what I think that they will do. I think they will take part of the story of Star Wars Underworld. I mean, it would be a shame to throw away all that development that was done artistically. I mean, they've poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into that. You've got great writing talents there, Ronald D. Moore, and there's some other writers. They could salvage part of that story, but make it bigger. Think bigger than what George Lucas was thinking at the time. You know, who wants to see a depressing film noir type of TV show? But what if you would take that and integrate it into a bigger story? And just go to different planets. It has to feel like Star Wars. And nowadays, you can do that. One of the reasons that George Lucas wanted to go and stay on Coruscant was that it would be much easier to build. You only have to make Coruscant-style sets. And another thing that we know from Ronald D. Moore, in one of his interviews, he said, it's just, or was it George Lucas who said that? It's going to be like Star Wars 4. So it's going to be funny, there's going to be humor in it, but it's going to be much more talking. So it's going to be more like a sitcom. I think it's probably because sitcoms are cheaper to make, but nowadays you don't have to do that. Look at Battlestar Galactica. That looks like a movie, and it's way beyond a sitcom. And we're already, 10 years past Battlestar Galactica, the reboot. So they can truly make this happen and give it the scope of Star Wars without having to go to, look at what Star Trek Discovery is doing. I think of that type of look. I'm pretty sure that Disney is now pitching. That's the kind of storytelling. That's also the type of quality that we need to match. If Star Trek can do it, then we need to do it, because this is Star Wars. And Star Wars and Star Trek is like apples and pears and whatever. I'm not going to meddle with that. It's too dangerous. Balance there should be. So another reason that I don't think they're going to it's going to be too dark is Jon Favreau. It's just not his style. So I think it's going to be funnier and more lighthearted. Let's see. There were some other things. There is a possibility, of course, that time frame is already occupied by the sequel to the Star Wars Rebels series. I'm pretty sure that there's going to be a sequel to that. However, it could also be that the sequel is going to be this live-action movie, that will just move on from animated movie to live-action TV. Why not? It's all canon. But there could also be another animated series. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what Disney is going to announce next. Another option would be the time frame, and this is less likely, I think, because the animated series could go there too, is to fill in the gap between Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, and Episode 7, The Force Awakens. That is also a big time frame. The time that Luke Skywalker went missing. There are so many stories that you want to tell there. I mean, the origins of Kylo Ren. Think of the what we are learning now with the soon-to-be-released Blu-ray edition of The Last Jedi. What Rian Johnson has said and Andy Serkis has said about the backstory of Snoke. They said they deliberately kept Snoke a mystery because Disney was already thinking about perhaps telling that story some other time, a standalone movie or TV show. So that's another option. They could go to between that would give them years and years of potential storytelling that is currently only occupied by a couple of novels that really play it safe. I'm thinking perhaps that would be something they could do with an animated series. I'm just thinking it's too much of a gamble. I think bringing back Lando, bringing back Boba Fett, Yoda, Darth Vader, that's a safe bet. That's what I would do if I were helming Disney, which is probably a good thing that I'm not, because I'm a white male and I'm a priest.